Okay, my friends, I am excited. I just got this from a friend of mine, Steve Rads, and he thought maybe I had already seen this, which I had not. And this goes back to, I believe it was 1876 or 1874, something like that. And it's a case of instant petrification. And it's documented by a guy who was a rock hound. Or he did 30 years of collecting rocks and knowing everything about them. And then I'll explain to you the details of it. It's not a long article, but it's substantial. Now, I'm gonna read you the details of how this person became petrified, literally almost petrified, it sounds like, within a few hours, tops. And this is also reported by Yale, but I said to him, I think when I was doing business, trying to get them to look at my stuff, I said, this stuff appears it might have happened in just a few hours or days or very quickly because of the first of all, the petrification is so exact and perfect. And in some cases, all the color and everything, I mean, some of the bones or even meat looks just like it was meat. So something happened very extremely fast, and now I realize what it was due to this article, and it relates to the silica. And I have silica here, and anyway, we're going to get into the details of this. Oh, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Wait till you hear this. All right, this just blew my mind, absolutely, totally scattered my brains. The cause of the petrification of this girl who drank this fluid, the cause was filling the interstitial spaces. Interstitium, they just say they discovered it. 150 years ago, they're talking about it. Filling the interstitial spaces, and the necessary result was almost instantaneous petrification, solidifying the tissues and ending in death. The process being that of infiltration, which is nucleophilic infiltration substitution. It's called nucleophilic invasion. Infiltration, same thing. They were writing about this 150 years ago. and this was because she drank silica. So now I have silica here. This is for plants. So I start reading about it, and it talks about almost the same thing, instant petrification. I'm not kidding you. Wait till you hear this. You see this? This is a mind blower. I start reading about it. Once you start using this silica, it attaches to the cell walls and makes them rigid, and you have to continue to use it or the plant will die because it basically petrifies the cell walls as soon as instantaneously as it starts using it. And if you don't continue to use it, something happens. It tells you once you start, you got to keep going. Well, here, I'll read it exactly what it says. Hold on, let me get this here. It says, once silica is incorporated into the cell wall of a plant, it is immobile. All right, it says it needs to be applied constantly to the crop. Once silicon is incorporated into the cell wall of the plant, it is immobile. So it's locked in there. The silicon locks in and makes it solid. Now, when you read what they had to do to get into this woman's body after she drank the silicon, it's absolutely unbelievable. Or silica, and I'm fully understanding it now, because this was the reason for this exceptional preservation was because of the silica. Exactly what it says here. Promoted by silica-rich oceans, exceptional preservation. And that's what happened, is the silica she drank. Now, the silica that was in the oceans was because Venus almost hit Earth and disturbed all of the silicon which sits on the ocean floor. It's a silicon ooze, they call it. Hold on. See, here's exactly what happened. Siliceous ooze, which is a silicate, is a type of biogenic sediment located on the deep ocean floor. It's just a ooze that coats the floor. It's very heavy. And when we got hit by Venus, everything, the whole oceans was disturbed and turmoil, and got all over the Earth. It was just mixed with all these heavy silicates, precisely as it says at Yale. All right, so before we get too deep into this rabbit hole, what you have to remember is this was the worldwide flood, and all of that silicate ooze came up from the basement layers right at the bottom of the ocean. It came all up and mixed, and the silica, I didn't realize how fast it did preserve things. I thought a couple days maybe at best, but they're talking 45 minutes. This woman turned into solid stone, basically. And, you know, it sounds like that to me. Now, we're going to read through this article, but this is what it is, silica-rich oceans. And they say it could have happened within a matter of hours. That's Yale, not me. I didn't think it was that fast. I told him I thought it was very fast, but I didn't think 45 minutes. See, Yale says that they could turn into rock over a matter of hours rather than thousands or millions of years. And they were buried rapidly in this underwater storm event because the whole Earth was underwater, so it was one just gigantic global flood with this extremely dense amounts of silicates from the ooze that came up. That was the key that was missing. And now I understand how it mineralizes so quickly because of this case 150 years ago. All right, let's just read this together, and I'll make a couple of statements, I'm sure, here and there about what it means. Now, again, this is from my friend Steve, and this was to a newspaper, and this was an article in a newspaper. He sent me the article clipping. Now, sir, this is to the editor of the Sun newspaper. Sir, there have been so many comments in the papers, and I received so many letters which it is impossible for me to answer in reference to the curious case of petrification which recently came under my notice. Petrification. Now, I am constrained to write an account of the whole affair, giving at the same time my hypothesis as explanatory as his explanation, his rationale. Now, Mr. Frederick Haller is by profession a lawyer. He early acquired, however, quite a fondness for the natural sciences, especially geology. He has perhaps the largest and most complete geological cabinet in Louisiana. Wherever he wishes to relieve whenever he wishes to relieve himself from the dry details of the law, he draws himself to his rock study. He calls it his rock study. He keeps his cabinet and books relating to science, and there passes many hours in experiment in reading and manipulating the geological, paleontological collections, which, through a period of 30 years, he has drawn together. Now it comes to his beautiful bride. All right, this is where it gets very, very, very interesting. Now, having married early in life, some 5 years ago he lost his wife and gave up his household affairs to an elderly maiden sister. Something over a month ago he married again, taking as his bride a beautiful, charming young girl of 16 years old. It goes for the young chicks. Now, as a physician to her father's family and an intimate friend, I was an honored guest at the marriage ceremony. I am sure I never saw a more beautiful and happy bride. No one could have dreamed of the strange fate which awaited her. Now, on the next day, on the morrow after the wedding, Mr. Haller took his young bride to his residence. So they went home to her new home. It was a splendid mansion in the suburb of the village. She was accompanied by a number of her female friends who were to spend a day with her. A bunch of young girls, 16 years old. So, while he having business of importance at the office as her husband, he promised to return as speedily as he could after disposing of the business. The bride, being installed in her new home, cared to take little notice of the household matters for this day of matrimonial life, preferring to amuse herself with her friends who had come over with her, knowing that the domestic affairs were in good hands. She probably had all kinds of servants. So the guy had a mansion. He's a lawyer or whatever. All right, now listen to this. This is where it gets crazy. All right, get ready. All right, now this just gets deeper and deeper. This is kind of fun. Now, remember, he's a geologist. Well, he's not really a geologist, but that's where his passion lies. So he's got this huge collection. So, at about 1 o'clock, this young girl, she and some 3 or 4 of her most intimate friends went into Mr. Haller's rock study, which we already mentioned. And they looked over the cabinet of the curiosities, where they amused themselves in frivolous gaieties, such as young and thoughtless girls would indulge in, harmless and innocent to all appearances. Among the curiosities which Mr. Haller had gathered were several round boulders brought from Arkansas. These boulders, on being broken, present in the central space a crystalline formation, and are usually not much larger than a double fist. I guess they mean something like that. No. One of these, however, was unusually large, measuring 21 inches in circumference. Well, in circumference all the way around. So frequently, the internal surface, always hollow, contains water, or rather a concentrated solution of silica in water. So it's basically full of the silica, which was in all of the waters, and there's a cavity in there, so it filled up, and then as it started to crystallize, it would turn into all of these crystal fibers. Now, this fact was known to one of the young ladies who mentioned it. At once they began to wonder whether there was water in the large boulder. 2 of the smaller ones had been broken, showing in the center large crystals, and had contained water. So they knew that some of them have water in them, according to the assertion of the young lady who had gained her information at some other time in a previous visit. So they knew. They said, wow, some of these have water in them. Let's smack that sucker open and see if there's any water in there. All right, so here's what happened. The fatal draught. Now, at once, it was proposed to break the large one open. Several ineffectual attempts, bang, 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 were made by them with a geological hammer always present. They called to their aid a colored man, a servant on the place, who was requested to break open the rock, as they called it. He readily consented, being willing to thus render his first service to his new mistress, the new bride of the mansion. Now, a pitcher being placed underneath the boulder, so they got a nice pitcher under it. They take the boulder, they put it in there, and he gives it a whack. So they put the boulder, as the man held it, one sturdy blow of the stalwart arm cracked it. Pops open. All the fluid ran into the pitcher, scarcely losing a drop, so they got it all basically. There being half a pint of it in this pitcher, half a pint. Right? A few additional blows opened the boulder, presenting large, fine, transparent crystals of quartz. Quartz is SiO2, silicon dioxide. Silicon is the key here. Silica is what we're dealing with. Now, these were much admired in these really quartz-looking things, and other friends were called from the parlor to look at the novelty. Wow, we got a whole bunch of crystals in there. The bride, without ever giving it a thought, conceived the notion of drinking the water from the boulder. She poured most of it into a glass tumbler, near filling the tumbler, and lifting it to her lips, she drank first to the health of her husband, yay, then to that of the unmarried friends, and then, wishing them shortly to be happy brides like herself, she drained the whole glass. She drank the whole thing, which was a full tumbler. Now, all being done so quickly that no one had time to interfere or think that any consequence might fall. So nobody even said, don't drink it. She's done. All right, now listen to this. This is amazing. Rigid in death. Now, at first, it was thought that no harm was done. And it was considered a fine joke, and much merriment was made. They're all laughing, having a good time. But in a few minutes, the youthful bride complained of excessive pain in her stomach, and she began to realize the rashness of her actions. A messenger was sent in haste for her husband, and myself, Mr. Howler's office being near my own. We received the message almost simultaneously, so they came to get him real quick. Oh, she's sick, hurry up. We rapidly drove together in my buggy to his house. Now, this is 1874, I think. When we arrived, she was dead. All right? It was only 15 minutes having elapsed from the time of taking the fatal drink to the time of her death, extinction of her life. They were just laying her out on our arrival. So they got there and they're just laying her out. She was dead. To my surprise, I found that she had grown in that short period so rigid as to render it difficult to straighten her limbs. She was apparently distorted a little bit, and they're trying to make her nice and straight. They couldn't hardly do it. She was already rigid in 15 minutes. Now, in the course of 3/4 of an hour, so for 45 minutes total, her entire body became as hard and inflexible as bone. Her entire body. Now, I pass over the grief and consternation of the husband and the family as something too sacred for remark, so he's not going to talk about that. He's confining himself exclusively to the scientific facts. Now, this was very, very well documented. I was stunned. It was plain something akin to the ossification had taken place. All right? Ossification is boniness. On more minute examination and inquiry, I found that the dissolved silica she had taken into her stomach had been absorbed and transmitted by cryophytic apparatus and blood vessels. So that's just actually through the interstitium, throughout the system, and that her whole body was petrified. Her whole body was a petrification. Just solid. No way. This gets even worse and worse and worse. I can't hardly believe it, but it sounds very, very legitimate now. The case being so singular and so sudden, the husband and the bride's family consented to a partial post-mortem examination. They wanted to see, wow, how could this possibly happen? This is instantly. Other medical men coming to my assistance, we found it impossible to cut through any portion with our scalpels. So they normally take the scalpel, they cut it in there, and Dr. Ferguson broke his scalpel in the first attempt. We were able only to break through the chest with a hatchet, finding extreme difficulty in entering the thoracic cavity, the contents being all solidified. The heart was found as firm and as solid as stone, resembling a piece of cornelian as to both color and consistency. Entering the abdominal cavity only by means of repeated blows of the hatchet, we found the contents of the stomach, the food, the bile, the liver, and other neighboring organisms solidified. The food, the bile, the liver, all the organs solidified. It is needless to say, we found it impossible to remove anything except in fractured pieces. They had to keep hitting it with a hatchet. The arteries and veins were perfectly rigid, the blood itself being changed to stone. And the blood it changes right into stone. The red blood stays pretty fluidy, though. It rehydrates quickly. Now we go into changed to stone. Alright, so they're trying to keep examining things. So here's what happened. He says, having satisfied ourselves of the stony character of the entire body, so it's just turned to stone, and its contents, It was delivered to the family and interred. Some suspicions having been aroused that there might have been poison in the pitcher which held the silica solution. All the witnesses have been sworn and have testified under oath, apparently, that there was no poison. Now, my first object was to secure the remains of the solution of silica left in that pitcher, there being about an ounce left, which I carefully put into a vial, corking closely. Portions of this have been variously tested, the result each time showing simply a very strong solution of silica in pure water. The few drops which had been left in the tumbler exposed to evaporation became in short time a hard, clear concrete resembling flint or rather transparent quartz, yielding sparks on being struck against steel. Here's what happens. When that ball had that hole in the center of it, it filled up with the water, but the water was almost saturated with silica. But it has no oxygen. So it's a silica with no oxygen. You have to have oxygen to make SiO2. It's right now silica in a little bit of a hydrated state. Somehow it's a fluid silica. And then apparently a little bit of oxygen was getting in there, making these crystals start to grow inside. Because when they break them open, there's still silica in the fluids form, but there's then these crystals formed because somehow the oxygen got inside. But once you break it open, she took it out, she drank it, turned her into a stone. He took it and put it in a vial, thinking he could preserve it in the liquid form, and you can't. It's already been exposed to oxygen. Turns into stone as well, but a clear stone. All right, so that's the case, turning into quartz. All right, so it goes on, and again, this is from the article. These are the words from the article. Now it says the cause of petrification. The pathology in this case, while it is very striking, is very plain. Although I differ with my conferees in regard to the final or ultimate cause, it is well known as a geological fact that petrification are due to the infiltration, which is nucleophilic infiltration, of siliceous earth or lime into the interstitial space. This is right now, interstitial spaces of the substance undergoing the process. That's the petrification. They knew this back then. Apparently they knew about petrification. Let's read this again, because this is just, they knew that these things could petrify. It wasn't even a big deal. The case is very simple, very plain. All right? It is well known as a geological fact, well known in geology, that petrification of creatures apparently are due to infiltration, which is a nucleophilic substitution of siliceous earth, which is a silicon stuff, which is the biomineralizer, or lime. Now, here's limestone, and there's this other stone. Yeah, I have to agree with this. And it goes into the interstitial spaces. They just say they just discovered interstition. It's amazing. Of the substance undergoing the process. So they knew that things could be petrified. They understood this. And up until just a few years ago, they rejected the fact that anything could be petrified geologically. And it's a well-known fact. They understood it. It's well known also as a physiological fact that various substances, usually medicinal agents, when taken into the stomach, are rapidly conveyed to every portion of the human body. That's through this interstitium, the fluid-filled highway. It moves to every portion of the human body. That's why she was completely 100% petrified. You take all this stuff up into your intestines very quickly. And once it gets in the intestine, into the interstitial highway, it's everywhere. So, again, it's also very well known as a physiological fact, various substances Usually medicinal agents, when taken into the stomach, are rapidly conveyed to every portion of the human body, and that must be what the silica does too. Some instances in the space of 2 minutes to the whole body. In this instance, the flint of quartz, which is the calcareous earth, was held in solution, and being swallowed was rapidly conveyed everywhere throughout the body, filling the interstitial spaces, interstitium. The necessary result was almost instantaneous petrification, solidifying the tissue and ending in death, the process being that of infiltration, nucleophilic invasion and substitution. All right. Now, this is the geological view, and while it is in the main correct, it wholly fails to explain why so small an amount of the solution should petrify so large a body, and should do so in such a brief time. I have to agree with that. I do not believe that on the hypothesis of infiltration alone, petrification would take place so rapidly. That was my original thought too. I said I got to give it some more consideration here and do some tests. I have silica here. I have this silica, same stuff here, silica. So I'm going to play around. But anyway, that's pretty quick. 45 minutes, it's a block of stone. Now, there is no doubt of the absorption of the dissolved silica and of its rapid conveyance to every part of the body, but that the petrification is owing to infiltration, I cannot admit. Well, the fluid-filled highway touches every membrane in your entire body. I mean, every cell. Every single cell, basically, is touched by this fluid-filled highway. Every cell has to be able to be maintained by the fluids that are in this fluid-filled highway, which is bacteria and enzymes, which create the chemistry to do the job, so that you can't get invaded in one place. You got to be able to send the troops everywhere in the body, and that's where you do it, through this fluid-filled highway. So I have to disagree with him in that particular case. I believe it could be strictly from the infiltration. All right, it must be explained upon a different hypothesis. Well, yes and no. Let's see if there is a better hypothesis. Now, a different hypothesis says it's well known by physiologists that those protein compounds, which is albumin, fibrin, casein, and gluten, are the proximate organic elements which constitute the compounds of the human body. All right, so they're saying these are the different compounds. Well, the protein compounds are formed by carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen in definite proportions, according to my distinguished countryman, Professor, well, whoever that is, and these are the different chemistry, each having a different amount of phosphorus. There's the key. Phospholipids. Phosphorus. Everything has the phosphorus around it, because that's where the membrane is. And sulfur. Sulfur is another one that's a very another interesting chemistry. I want to look into that a little deeper. Now, the combination forming so many molecules. All right, the phospholipids, they turned into aluminum silicates now. Now, the silica is a compound of oxygen and silicon. All right, SiO2. Well, silica is not SiO2. Hold on a second. Yeah, it's SiO2, silica. So now, the silica is a compound of oxygen and silicon, so it is the SiO2. Now, in a very small amount of silica, the number of atoms of silicon is immense, and that's true, because it is heavy, 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 very heavy silicon. So the number of atoms in a very small amount is immense number of atoms. The very moment the silica enters the circulation and is distributed throughout the capillaries, it parts with its oxygen. So the oxygen is removed, probably by the catalase. Now, in each atom of silicon being set free combines with a protein molecule. So the silica immediately has to bond with something to stabilize. These protein molecules, which form respectively the albumin, the fibrin, the casein, and the gluten, at once change these organic elements into what might be termed petrifactive elements, destroying, as it were, the vital germs, and which means the living or part of it, and substituting, which is the nucleophilic substitution, inorganic proteinase particles. They substitute them so they take over and stabilize. I submit this as the most philosophical rationale. Well, they're both basically the same to me. Now, to all inquiries, he says, in conclusion, I would say that I invariably answer all correspondents who have sought information from me in regards to this case, who have written in a candid manner searching after truth, and who do not seem to be writing out of a mere idle curiosity. One correspondent went so far as to ask whether the body could be obtained for exhibition, offering a large sum of money. Such unfeeling wretches are not worthy of being replied to. I may add that I may be addressed as Marksville, L.A., but after that March 1st, I shall be the greater part of next year at Patcham in the province of Mecklenburg, where that's Schwein. Now, this was the article. A bride turned to stone. And what we just read was all of this stuff. And this, I think it was 1874. Here it is right there. You got January 1874. So that's 150 years ago. Almost exactly. And they knew about the interstitium. They knew about the fluid-filled highway. They knew about petrification. They knew it's wide known, it's well known. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing that we can just slough this stuff off and forget about it and just go on with our life and start over and over and over again. Steve, my friend, thank you, buddy. It was good to get this, and Happy New Year to you and to everybody else. Thank you. I love you all. All right, this is basically what she was breaking open. Was a very large geode, and this has had the same sort of situation. It was all filled with silicates, and over the course of time, enough oxygen apparently moved in there to form these crystalline structures. Because I believe that would be what you'd need to get a little more oxygen in there to start to mineralize the fluid and turn it into crystals. See, here's some other ones. Some of them are like really filled up with fluid, and but they all primarily have crystals inside because they're filled with these fluids originally. Now, did the fluids leak out? Some of them. If they did, you end up with some little crystalline stuff inside and just an empty cavity, perhaps. If the fluids stayed in there for a long period of time and couldn't get out at all, which is the case in some of them, like probably this one over here, then you end up with this. And it would probably fill that whole thing up as one at a time. And I have hearts here. This is a heart. That's the inside of a heart, completely saturated with silicates. This is another heart. That's the aorta right there. That's the ventricle wall. It still has a taste of blood left in it. And all that, this is the muscle, the smooth cardiac muscle. And that's the aorta right up there. That's a heart. All right, and this was completely transitioned. It's called a water opal. Some of these turn into opals, which is when you have all the transition metals, which is all the blood, the metals in the blood, and they collect in there just for a long period of time and mix with the silicates. You get the fabulous colors. I'll show you some hearts And I'll show you why I can say this is a heart and so is this. All right, you see that? That's a heart. Let me see. Oh, a minute. Well, I'll keep it there. This is the aorta area right up in here. All right, there's a little red blood looking stuff. There's a bloody area here, this whole area here. Now, this right here is the same as like here or here, one or the other. And it is a heart. It's a heart. Now, it's been completely transitioned. Now, this one was also, and I cut it. But you see it? It's the same stuff. And this is all transitioned into silicon. All right, SiO2, it was everywhere. And it filled all the cavities. Wherever there was cavities or wherever it could take over, it did. Like even this lung here. This is a lung from I don't know what. But it's a little small lung. Now, they have cavities in the back, and that just filled in with silicates. Now, they have to be in the right area to fill in with the silicates. I have other lungs that just emptied out. Here's a lung here. Hold on. There's one right there. It's just emptied out. That's a lung, just like this was a lung. All right, this one didn't empty out. This one actually filled up this hole with silicates, and the rest just turned to stone because it didn't evacuate. Now, why this completely dissolved everything out of it? It must have been next to some acids or salts or something like that. And this, I don't know. There's a lot to learn here, so it's nothing is solved completely. And these are the transition colors. All right, so you see all those different colors? That's what's in blood. All of those metals are in your blood. That's what your blood is made out of. Basically, it's made out of metals. It's metals in plasma. And I can show you those metals in a heart that has become an opal heart. And there it is right there. Isn't that spectacular? Isn't that spectacular? Everywhere where you see all these different color changes, that means whatever that tissue was, whatever it was made out of, the chemistry of it wanted to attach to some specific transition metal to become stable. That's why it's all these different colors. Every one of those is a different transition metal. So you see down here all these different little colors? That was the bottom, that heart was laying this way. And I know that because these are heavier than the plasma. The plasma side here, see it? That was up, and they cut straight down the middle of it. This would have been laying that way. And again, these are from the Great Flood. Now this is from the Yoa region in Australia, and they call them Yoa nuts. And they're little organs that have been invaded, and they've turned into spectacular opals. And I just happen to know what this is. I don't even know if anybody recognized it was a heart. I don't see how you could miss it, but anyway, that's what it is. And that's why these different colors are specific to different tissues. Different little, very, very, very nuanced colors, because these tissues are extremely varied. There's all kinds of different tissue in your body that is all right next to each other, working in conjunction with each other to do the job of life. This is just spectacular. Spectacular what the human body is, and any creature. I mean, just any creature. From the biggest to the smallest. And when I talk about biggest, how about that? Here they are working down here. We as Mudfossil people know 100% for certainty this is some kind of biology. And this, I believe, up at the top here is basically like almost like your skin. Really just about that thick of skin. And then you get down into your muscly sort of stuff. Is it down in here, just below the skin? And then this, I don't know what the hell's going on here, whether these are all interstitium balls or what. I have no idea. But I'm looking at this here, that black layer. That's a black layer. It's not just black looking there for nothing. That whole layer is black. And all out of these cavities is something's dumping out, where it looks like vein blood to me. This one I don't know. I would say this one would be an artery, but I don't know. This looks black. Black is usually, I associate it to veins. Now you got another layer here, which is rusty color. I associate that to arteries. Well, look at that. And that's down in Pennsylvania. This stuff is, it's up over the top. Look, this is right up close. I don't know what's coming out. I think this is an artery because I'm seeing red here. I'm seeing, I don't know if you are, I'm seeing this reddish look. This is black. That's black as it gets. So I got to say this is an arterial, I mean a vein, or a layer of vein blood. All right. Okay, let me just leave you with this. I'm going to just scan through over half a dozen stone balls because they come all different styles. This is like the eggshell type, and they can be hollow inside, as I will show you. I'm sure we're going to have some other ones that are. These are just ones that are as they get eroded away off of the cliffs, they show up on the seashores. These ones here are eroding out of another. This is nothing more than skin. This is another one they're eroding out of skin. This is kaolin clays, bentonite clay. It's all skin. Clay is skin, basically. Now, these are stone balls that dried out quicker than other ones. When they fracture like this, they were up on a higher elevation and dried out quicker than ones that are lower. The lower ones stayed completely, perfectly round, very perfect. See, these dried out fairly quickly too. That's why they fractured. When they dry out quick, they fracture. This, that was in some kind of chemistry. You saw the transition metals. I don't know what it was, but it turned it green. And that's one of these shelled ones. And again, inside, some of them are totally hollow, like this one here. It's hollow. And they were everywhere. And they are everywhere around the world. But nobody's ever talked about them because they don't know what to say. Geologists avoid them because they have nothing to say about them. That one there dried out earlier. It's up on a hillside. And then the stuff eroded away and left the stalk, because they all have a stalk going to these balls. Those balls aren't just laying there for no reason. There's always a stalk attached to them, which locks them in position. They're anchors. They're anchors in bodies. All right, there's one right there. You see the top fall off. But they are anchors in bodies. There's straps going to them to hold so that you can pull against them. Here's some kids playing on some broken ones. Look, they're all over the beach. They're all eroding out of this here because they're just gigantic. The creatures were absolutely enormous back then. I think I showed you this one. No, I think I showed you all of those.